Lamb to Slaughter, Part 2. She might just as well have hit him with a steel club. She stepped back a pace, waiting, and the funny thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds, gently swaying. Then he crashed to the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning, helped bring her out of the shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a while blinking at the body, still holding the ridiculous piece of meat tight with both hands. All right, she told herself. I've killed him. It was extraordinary, now, how clear her mind became all of a sudden. She began thinking very fast. As the wife of a detective, she knew quite well what the penalty would be. That was fine. It made no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. On the other hand, what about the child? What were the laws about murderers with unborn children? Did they kill them both, mother and child? Or did they wait until the 10th month? What did they do? Mary Maloney didn't know. And she certainly wasn't prepared to take the chance. She carried the meat into the kitchen, placed it in a pan, turned the oven on high, and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands and ran upstairs to the bedroom. She sat down before the mirror, tidied her face, touched up her lips and face, and she tried a smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. "Hello, Sam," she said brightly aloud, and the voice sounded peculiar too. "I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas." That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now, and she rehearsed it several times more. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, went out to the back door, down the garden, into the street. It wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. "Hello, Sam," she said brightly, smiling at the man behind the counter. "Why, good evening, Miss Maloney. How are you?" "I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas." The man turned and reached up behind him on the shelf for the peas. "Patrick's decided he's tired and doesn't want to eat out tonight," she told him. "We usually go out on Thursdays, you know, and now he's caught me without any vegetables in the house." "Then how about meat, Mrs. Maloney?" "No, I've got meat, thanks. I got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer." "Oh, I don't much like cooking it frozen, Sam, but I'm taking a chance on this time." "You think it'll be all right?" "Personally," the grocer said, "I don't believe it makes much of a difference. Any difference. You want these Idaho potatoes?" "Oh, yes, that'll be fine. 2 of those." "Anything else?" The grocer cocked his head on one side, looking at her pleasantly. "How about afterwards? What are you going to give him afterwards?" "Well, what would you suggest, Sam?" The man glanced around his shop. "How about a nice big slice of cheesecake? I know he'd like that." "Perfect," she said. "He loves it." And when it was all wrapped and she had it paid, she put on her brightest smile and said, "Thank you, Sam. Good night." "Good night, Miss Maloney, and thank you." And now she told herself as she hurried back all she was doing now. She was returning home to her husband, and he was waiting for his supper, and she must cook it good and make it as tasty as possible because the poor man was tired. And if, when she entered the house, she happened to find anything unusual or tragic or terrible, then naturally it would be a shock, and she'd become frantic with grief and horror. Mind you, she wasn't expecting to find anything. She was just going home with vegetables. Mrs. Patrick Maloney going home with vegetables on Thursday evening to cook supper for her husband. That's the way she told herself. Do everything right and natural. Keep things absolutely natural, and there'll be no need for any acting at all. Therefore, when she entered the kitchen by the back door, she was humming a little tune to herself and smiling. "Patrick," she called, "how are you, darling?" She put the parcel down on the table and went through into the living room, and when she saw him lying there on the floor with his legs doubled up and one arm twisted beneath his body, it really was rather a shock. All the old love and longing for him welled up inside her, and she ran over to him, knelt down beside him, and began to cry her heart out. It was easy. No acting was necessary. few minutes later she got up and went to the phone. She knew the number of the police station when the man at the other end answered, and she cried to him, "Quick! Come quick! Patrick's dead!" "Who's speaking?" "Mrs. Maloney. Mrs. Patrick Maloney." "You mean Patrick Maloney is dead?" "I think so," she sobbed. He's lying on the floor, and I think he's dead." "Be right over," the man said. The car came rather quickly, and when she opened the front door, the two policemen walked in, and she knew them both. She knew nearly all the men at the precinct, and she fell right into Jack Noonan's arms, weeping hysterically. He put her gently into a chair, and then went over to join the other one, who was called O'Malley, kneeling by the body. "Is he dead?" she cried. "I'm afraid he is. What happened?" Briefly she told her story about going to the grocer and coming back to find him on the floor. While she was talking, crying and talking, Noonan discovered a small patch of congealed blood on the dead man's head. He showed it to O'Malley, who got up at once and hurried to the phone. Soon the other men began to come into the house. First a doctor, then two detectives, one of whom she knew by name. Later a police photographer arrived and took pictures, and a man who knew about fingerprints. There was a great deal of whispering and muttering beside the corpse, and the detectives kept asking her a lot of questions, but they always treated her kindly. She told her story again, the time right from the beginning, when Patrick come in, and she was sewing, and he was tired, so tired, he hadn't wanted to go out for supper. She told how she'd put the meat into the oven. It's there now, cooking, and how she'd slipped out to the grocer for vegetables and come back to find him lying on the floor. "Which grocer?" one of the detectives asked. She told him, and he turned and whispered something to the other detective, who immediately went outside into the street. In 15 minutes he was back with a page of notes, and there was more whispering, and through her sobbing she heard a few of the whispered phrases. "Acted quite normal, very cheerful. Wanted to give him a good supper, peas, cheesecake. Impossible that she—" After a while, the photographer and the detective departed, and two of the other men came in and took the corpse away on the stretcher. Then the fingerprint man went away. The two detectives remained, and so did the two policemen. They were exceptionally nice to her, and Jack Noonan asked if she wouldn't rather go somewhere else, to her sister's house perhaps, or to his own wife, who would take care of her and put her up for the night. "No, no," she said. She didn't feel she could even move, even a yard at the moment. Would they mind awfully if she stayed just where she was until she felt better? She didn't feel too good at the moment. She really didn't. Then, hadn't she better lie down on the bed? Jack Noonan asked. No, she said. She'd like to stay right where she was, in this chair. A little later, perhaps, when she felt better, she would move. So they left her there while they went about their business, searching the house, and occasionally one of the detectives asked her another question. Sometimes Jack Noonan spoke so gently as he passed by. Her husband, he told her, had been killed by a blow on the back of the head, administered with a heavy blunt instrument, almost certainly a large piece of metal. They were looking for the weapon. The murderer may have taken it with him, but on the other hand, he may have thrown it away or hidden it somewhere on the premises. It's the old story, he said. Get the weapon and you've got the man. Later, one of the detectives came up and sat beside her. Did she know, he asked, of anything in the house that could have been used as the weapon? Would she mind having a look around to see if anything was missing? A very big spanner, for example, or a heavy metal vase? They didn't have any heavy metal vases, she said, or a big spanner. She didn't think they had a big spanner, but there might be some things like that in the garage. The search went on. She knew that there were other policemen in the garden all around the house. She could hear their footsteps on the gravel outside, and sometimes she saw the flash of the torch through a chink in the curtains. It began to get late, nearly none, as she noticed by the clock on the mantel. The four men searching the room seemed to be growing weary, a trifle exasperated. "Jack," she said, the next time Sergeant Noonan went by, "would you mind giving me a drink?" "Sure, I'll give you a drink. You mean this whiskey? Oh, yes, please." but just a small one. It might make me feel better." He handed her the glass. "Why don't you have one yourself?" she said. "You must be awfully tired. Please do. You've been very good to me." "Well," he answered, "it's not strictly allowed, but I might just take a drop to keep me going." One by one the others came in and were persuaded to take a little nip of whiskey, and they stood around rather awkwardly, the drinks in their hands, uncomfortable in their presence, trying to say consoling things to her. Sergeant Noonan wandered into the kitchen, came out quickly, and said, "Look, Miss Maloney, you know the oven of yours is still on, and the meat's still inside." "Oh, oh dear me!" she cried. "So it is! I'd better turn it off for you, hadn't I?" Will you do that, Jack? Thank you so much." When the sergeant returned the second time, he looked at him with her large, dark, tearful eyes. "Jack Noonan," she said. "Yes?" "Would you do me a small favor? You and the others. We can try, Miss Maloney. Well," she said, here you all are. Here you all are, and good friends of my dear Patrick's too, and helping to catch the man who killed him. You must be terribly hungry by now, because it's long past your supper time. And I know Patrick would never forgive me, God bless his soul, if I allowed you to remain in this house without offering you a decent hospitality. Why don't you eat up the lamb that's in the oven? It'll be cooked just right by now." "Wouldn't dream of it," Sergeant Noonan said. "Please," she begged, "please eat it. Personally, I couldn't touch a thing, certainly not what's been in this house when he was here. But it's all right for you. It'd be a favor to me if you'd eat it up. Then you can go on with your work again afterwards." There was a good deal of hesitating among the 4 policemen, but they were clearly hungry, and in the end they were persuaded to go into the kitchen and help themselves, and the woman stayed where she was, listening to them through the open door. And she could hear them speaking among themselves, their voices thick and sloppy because their mouths were full of meat. "Have some more, Charlie?" "Oh, no, better not finish it." "She wants us to finish it," she said. "Be doing her a favor." "Okay, then, give me some more." "Oh, that's the head of the big club the guy must have used to hit poor Patrick," one of them was saying. "The doctor says his skull was smashed all into pieces, just like from a sledgehammer. That's why it ought to be easy to find." "Exactly what I'd say. Whoever done it, they're not going to be carrying a thing like that around with them longer than they need to." One of the men belched. "Personally, I think it's right here on the premises. Probably right under our very noses. What do you think, Jack?" And in the other room, Mary Maloney began to giggle.